Well, hi everybody. It's meteorologist Joe Chaffee. It's a Friday night, the 14th of December, February. The 14th. I don't know why I said that. The fourth. There's not. Never mind. The 14th of December, 2018. We've got 17 days left of the year. We've got 11 days before Christmas, 12 days before Christmas Eve, and we have a weekend right in front of us that is featuring some complicated weather, ranging from flood watches and heavy rains going on through the mid-Atlantic states on southward, and we've got severe weather across parts of northern and central Florida that's showing up on the radar. Also some heavy rains in coastal North Carolina that is moving in. And thanks, Jets fans, New York Jets fan weather. Really appreciate the super chat hit tonight. Thank you so much, and Merry Christmas to you and to your family. Thank you. Great way to support my channel, by the way, if you just hit super chat. I'm going to take care of business right up front, just to let everybody know, for those of you who are in the New York City, northern New Jersey, Long Island, Hudson Valley, and southern Connecticut area, I do have a free app for Android devices, and the link is up on the chat tonight, so just grab it if you'd like. And even if you're outside that particular area, it comes in handy because I write a lot of stuff that that regards the long range and the short range, and I do take a broader context. So it might be an easier way to get to it as opposed to going to the website. You can just have it there on your phone. There'll be an iPhone version of this, hopefully very soon. We're just at the very end of making some technical changes, and there will be some updates to the app coming in. And the app is absolutely free, so go ahead and take a look at that, and that is on Google Play. And for those of you who are into weather in a serious way, you might consider jumping on my Patreon platform, and the link is up there as well. It's a subscription platform at just $2 a month, and there's some slightly higher tiers available for those of you who might be feeling a little generous, but also if you're, if snow is your business, snow removal, et cetera, and you need a little bit of one-on-one during these storm situations, leading to, during, and afterward, this might work for you. I've got a bunch of snow removal people on it, and the link is also up there on the chat board. Okay, so let's get to our weather for tonight, because, as we said, it is rather busy in the east, in my neck of the woods, and for the Northeast. Some complications have arisen that we touched on in the last couple of days. They seem to be coming front and center now with regards to some colder air to the north that's going to attempt to bleed down on Sunday, and we'll get to the details on that in just a second. But right now, we've got flood watches for all of Virginia, and we also have some various flood advisories that have already been put up because of some of the heavy rains that have fallen through Virginia, North Carolina, a bunch of counties in northeastern South Carolina, southeastern Georgia, into northern Florida. We also have the remnants of a severe thunderstorm watch up for parts of central Florida. A few renegade flood watches up for southern Missouri. We've got some wind issues scattered around here and there, with small areas indicating wind advisories and some high wind warnings up in the west. We don't have any flood watches up for coastal Washington yet, as we await the arrival of the next surge of big rains. But as far as winter storm warnings and winter weather advisories go, really, we don't have much of anything except for a very small patch there for a couple of counties in Northern California, and that's about it. We also have some dense fog issues in northern Illinois and also through parts of southern and central Michigan. So kind of the way it's been lately with all these storms, we've been having some sorts of winter weather advisories going on somewhere along the line, but not tonight. Pretty quiet. I'm sure that'll change as we go down, move down the road, of course. But even in the stormiest patterns, you do wind up seeing breaks taking place from time to time. So on the severe weather risk, we've got a marginal risk of severe weather running up and down the Carolinas because of a warm front that is lifting in from the southeast to the northwest. So we've got marginal risks going on there, and that extends down into northern Florida. You can see that blue box indicative of a the remnant severe thunderstorm watch that is up, and that's inside a narrow area of slight risk that has been drawn inside central Florida. Otherwise, you have a sort of a general area of thunderstorms going back into the Ohio and Tennessee Valley, and also being indicated for parts of the Pacific Northwest, as we have a small area there in coastal Oregon, and you can see some bands of showers that are moving inland, but nothing in that area that is especially heavy. Now, why don't we take a look at the Weather Prediction Center's 7-day rainfall forecast. Now, they don't seem to be overly bullish on what the models are starting to show for next Thursday into Friday, probably because it just comes at the very end of their forecast period, but the forecast period goes through next Friday night, so I would have expected to see more. The rainfall amounts, now this does not count what has already fallen, so the amounts that you see in the Carolinas and down into North Florida is on top of what has already fallen so far during last night and today. The coastal area is getting a bit more, but the band that's up in northern Virginia and into southeastern New York and over New Jersey and southeastern Pennsylvania, that has yet to happen or is just started to happen, and that looks on the order of up to a couple of inches there, with lesser amounts as you go northward into New England. And of course, a ton of liquid precipitation over the next week from northern California, from just north of San Francisco on up into Washington State. There's some 10-inch plus amounts being indicated. So a ton of rain showing up there, with the systems coming in off the west coast. So we'll going to jump over to the surface map right now and take a look at what's going on with this low that has been just creeping its way out of the Gulf states. I mean, it's just on a crawl, and you can see it here. We've got a low center in southeastern Arkansas. The low is already occluded out, and the occluded front runs down into west central Alabama, where we have a point of occlusion low being analyzed. The trailing cold front into the western part of the Florida Panhandle, and you see how the warm sector is set up here. It is pretty much covering all of the state of Florida. If you look closely, you've got temperatures in the upper 70s, dew points in the 70s, going all the way up almost into northern Florida, certainly in the area where you have the severe thunderstorm watch up. And you've got some tropical air and humid conditions with dew points up in the mid-60s through southern Alabama, southern Georgia. That front has now worked its way inland of the coast of North Carolina, where we're seeing dew points in the mid-60s and temperatures now in the low 70s. So you have this kind of coastal front that's sort of wiggling up through the Carolinas. Not much happening up in the Northeast. We have a high that has moved already way out. We do have also a stationary frontal boundary that runs from eastern Michigan and then trails southward down through southern Indiana and in through Missouri. That's to the north of where this low center is. There's no real cold air, and that is evident from the fact that Scott Briller pointed out that the percentage of snow cover has dropped back in the last 7 days, and that has gone from where it was at about 42% to I think the mid-30s. The interesting thing about that is if you want to couple that with the fact that we've had this positive East Pacific oscillation being indicated, one of the pressure patterns that we look at. When that pattern is negative, that's cold air that gets that opens up from the Canadian Northwest and comes down into the United States. And it might actually be enhanced by other things going on in the North Atlantic or also out in the Pacific. But with an absence of that, with that EPO at the other extreme, we have much of the United States flooded with relatively mild air coming in from the Pacific. And we do have a front approaching the Pacific coast here with a low that is up in British Columbia that has moved inland. And that front is going to gradually progress eastward, and again those waves of rain that we've been seeing in the Pacific Northwest will be going on and off. Will be going on for a while. You can see it on the full radar here as another system moves inland, and it's always important for us to watch those systems as they come in, because ultimately, in one form or another, those systems do wind up in the east. But the system in the east, you actually have two separate areas here, because that coastal front that I showed you in the Carolinas, we're probably going to see a wave of low pressure develop on that front. That is going to take the bulk of this rain out to the east eventually, late tonight and early on Saturday. The northern fringe of this rain is going to probably make it just to about New York City and Long Island. We're seeing some light rain already reaching in. I don't think it's going to get much further north than maybe northern New Jersey for a few hours, or southern areas of the Hudson Valley and southern Connecticut, before we see that area drop down to the south and east. And we're going to have to wait for the rotation that you see on the radar back out to the west. That is the upper low, down southwest, I should say, down in northern Louisiana. You can see the rotation of the echoes in a counterclockwise fashion. We have to wait for that to kick out to the northeast. That is going to set up the situation for later Saturday night into Sunday night. That's going to be rain. And in some inland areas, north and west of the coast, we are seeing the probability now of some colder air getting involved, bleeding down from the north, and that is going to perhaps put freezing rain and sleet and maybe even some wet snow into the equation for places like northwest New Jersey, northeastern Pennsylvania, the Hudson Valley along and north of Route 84, running up into parts of upstate New York, and eventually into interior southern New England, and even up into central New England. So a pretty complex scenario that is shaping up here for the weekend. So we're going to start with that. I want to show you we're going to look at the 850 millibar level, which is about 4,700 feet in the atmosphere. This is a good level to look at when you want to try to figure out what your precip type is going to be. You want to look for the areas where the temperatures aloft are at that level are obviously below freezing. Ideally, for heavy snow, you look for a temperature probably about -1, -2. But when you've got a marginally cold air mass, you deal with what you have, and this is not a very cold air mass. It's a very shallow area of cold air that's going to be coming in, and I'm going to just back it up a little bit to the current time. The temperatures are on the side. I'm going to make sure you guys can see the scale here, but obviously where the freezing line is where the leading edge of that blue shading that you see. And it really isn't cold enough for snow unless you go up into northernmost Vermont, in a sliver along the Canadian border in upstate New York, and through a good chunk of Maine, except for the southeastern part. Now, as we move through Saturday, you're going to start to see that darker blue area is very cold air. The main push of that is going to go to the east, and that winds up really sort of pulling out. But now you've got this upper low that is going to be coming into play, and it's a cold upper low, so that has some of its own cyclonically generated cold air. And here we are at Sunday morning at 10 a.m. Notice you've got this blossoming area at that level where the temperatures are below zero. But it's in Pennsylvania and up into southern New York and up into the Catskills. So this right there tells you that elevation is going to be a big issue. I mean, it's going to be elevation driven, a lot of this stuff that's going to happen. And as we go through the day, the atmosphere is trying to cool, but with the absence of any Arctic air or cold Canadian air, this is really do-it-yourself cold air. It's not that impressive, okay? Let's just put it like this, at least from the standpoint of the NAM, which probably has the coldest profile of all the models that I saw today, although the parallel GFS does give it a run for its money. You start to see it get colder as the surface low which you can follow here. It kind of jumps around a little bit, but you're seeing it there southeast of Nantucket, a 999 low. This is at 1 a.m. Monday. And at this point, you're starting to see the atmosphere cool across most of the Northeast, except for the immediate coast. Of course, by this time, much of the precip could be over with, and then that system starts to drag down some colder air. There's another short wave in the northern part of the jet stream, which we'll look at, and that brings down a shot of cold air that comes in later Monday night into Tuesday. You see it here. One of the big problems in this whole scenario is the fact that the two streams of the jet stream are completely separate. And while you do have a short wave that is in that northern stream, it doesn't catch the system that's coming up from the south in time. They stay completely separate, and rather than phase, it winds up kicking it out to the northeast. If you had this northern stream system a little faster coming down, and let's say the surface low was somewhere down in Chesapeake Bay or down near the Delmarva Peninsula, if that southern feature were significantly slower, then you could run a chance where that trough would catch it, and then the storm would likely explode into a major storm. But not going to happen because the two streams stay separate. The surface low just starts to gain a little influence from this when it heads towards Nova Scotia late Monday afternoon into Monday night. And at that point, you're starting to see the pressures fall down into the 980s and lower. The upper trough now beginning to have its impact. But the timing is just absolutely all wrong when it comes to getting a really intensifying storm and a lot of cold air that's going to come in. Now, the other thing to look at when I talked about the fact that the cold air is shallow, if we look at the NAM's surface temperatures as that northeast wind begins to take hold during the day, Saturday and Saturday night, you can see the surface temperatures are colder, and you do have colder air that bleeds down into northern New Jersey, northeastern Pennsylvania, and down into the Hudson Valley. By 4 a.m., that 32-degree line is sitting somewhere just north of White Plains into northwest New Jersey. You've got a couple of counties there sitting at 32 or less. So this says to me, with that warmer 850 level, that if you wind up seeing, you get that rain to come up and it gets into this colder air, those areas that are under 32 obviously are going to see freezing rain, maybe some sleet in the mix. It looks like the very bottom of the atmosphere could get pretty cold in northeastern Pennsylvania, northwest New Jersey, Connecticut. You go north and west of Route 15, particularly north of Route 84. You start to see temperatures down in the 20s. That freezing line kind of advances a little bit northward during the day because of the developing low to the south, and then comes back down by the time we get to Monday morning. But it doesn't, quite make the coast. And of course, by then it's long over with. So I think what we're going to look for in the next 24 hours is to see how models trend with all of this, because oftentimes in situations like this, cold air becomes more important, and as a result, you wind up with perhaps that 32-degree line sinking down even further south. If it doesn't, regardless, if you're in areas in New Jersey, Long Island, southern New England, Sunday's going to be an absolutely miserable day, with temperatures probably in the 30s to at best near 40, and rain and a raw northeast wind. It's just not going to be pretty. As far as Saturday goes for my area, you can see that this first area of rain gets to about New York City and northern New Jersey and then starts dropping southward. This is that first low that's going out and takes that first area of rain with it. Then we wait for the upper low, the surface low with that in the panhandle of Virginia. That's going to now be forced to redevelop. Look up north of the Canadian border, you've got this surface high, and that's where the cold air is coming from. This weak building surface high. There's a little upper ridge there with the northern part of the jet stream. You get the cold air to bleed down, and there's your freezing rain by 4 a.m. Sunday in northeastern Pennsylvania, northwest New Jersey, and into the Hudson Valley. It kind of pushes northward because of the surface low where it is, and some snow starts to show up on the map. The one thing I would just point out that each model kind of has its own different view on all of this. The parallel GFS, because it has a surface low developing offshore further south and east, has it slightly colder. So you got this freezing rain patch that comes in by sunup on Sunday. But look where the second surface low is. It's way out. And it works with whatever precip that you can get with the upper low. It does generate some wet snow here in the Hudson Valley, in western Connecticut. Elevation is going to be really important here if that's correct. And then by 1 a.m., it's already gone. And in fact, the parallel GFS, unlike prior runs, which were trying to bring some accumulating snows to southern New Hampshire and a good chunk of Maine, this model has the surface low so far south and east that it basically misses it. It catches a little bit of deepening when it's south of Nova Scotia on Monday over in the eastern half of Maine, but it doesn't really get a full hit. Nova Scotia might not do half bad with this if this solution winds up being the one that's closer to reality. You can see there's a lot of isobars here, so it's going to be windy. The low on the parallel GFS gets fairly deep as it moves away. We don't have a map that can really show it. This is about as far east as we can go, but there's a 984 low there sitting south of Nova Scotia with some heavy snows being indicated just inland of the coast. The next high bills in, and it dries out. Meanwhile, let's just backtrack because we do have a rain and flood situations for the mid-Atlantic and down into the southeast with this first surge of rain. That part of it pulls out. You start to see the impact of the surface low with the upper low moving into Tennessee. So you're getting some precip that's kind of arcing back east-west. It's sort of in this narrow east-west band of moderate to heavy rain Saturday morning. But go north of Route 195 in New Jersey. Go north of Route 78, and I'm being generous here, in Pennsylvania. And you've really got next to nothing going on during the day on Saturday. More rain for the Carolinas, the eastern Carolinas during Saturday. Probably a little bit of convection there as that surface low, the first low pulls out, and then you've got the second low starting to do its thing. And then here comes the rain for Sunday and into Sunday evening, and then by 1 a.m. Monday morning, it is long gone. The upper air kind of tells the tale here pretty well. And all right, so I'm gonna go to Sunday morning, right at about the point where we're starting to get this cold air. So let me illustrate this on our trusty little paint box. Okay, and we got the paint box up, so that's good. All right, so what's going on? Well, for one thing, so here's that vigorous upper low, which is not quite as vigorous when it moves into Virginia. You have actually, if you look carefully, it's hard to see, but at the very top here, going into southeastern Canada, the flow is split, and you've got this upper high, or you can see the bottom of that ridge. The northern jet stream flow running completely separate from the southern stream, which is, there's your upper low that's driving that. And right in here, you have a shortwave in the north. It might be a little bit further west than that, but there's a shortwave in the north. You can see how everything is just sort of just completely separated. That northern shortwave is too far away to catch that southern shortwave and try to phase with it. That would have turned this system that's heading for the mid-Atlantic coast into a major storm if it were able to phase. It's not going to do that. Meanwhile, with this upper ridge in southeastern Canada, as a result, you get this surface high that develops. So the low-level cold air is what you see that winds up, bleeding southward here around the high and coming in to the areas that I described earlier: northeastern Pennsylvania, northwest New Jersey, the Hudson Valley, and interior Connecticut. The model trends in the next several runs are going to be important to see if that winds up pushing further south and if that low-level cold air is a bit more important. I don't know that you're going to get much more out of it in terms of what's been seen so far, if only because of the fact that we're not dealing with truly Arctic air here. This is kind of a dirty high. It's not a cold Eastern Canada high, really. When you compare it to other highs that come down, that build in that area, the air in Canada is not has some Pacific influence. So that's what I mean when I say it's basically a dirty high. The cold air is only at the very bottom of the atmosphere. The real cold air is behind that short wave that is moving into the western lakes at this point. And when we move on to, I'm going to move to Monday morning, copy the image, and we'll put that on the paint box now, and you can take a look at this. This is our upper air now for Monday morning. Again, unfazed, two completely separate systems. Your northern shortwave moving along, acting more as a kicker with this, taking this and just basically punting it out toward the northeast. And eventually this shortwave will drop in and you start to get colder air that comes in after all of this is pretty much long gone. So I think to just kind of wrap it up with regards to this particular system for the weekend, we're just going to probably wind up working with whatever we have, and we'll just keep an eye for temperature trends. It's kind of situation where if it's a degree colder, it could make a difference for somebody in terms of the outcome as far as frozen versus freezing precipitation. Here's the rainfall on the GFS. Now remember, this doesn't count what's already fallen, and it's since 1 o'clock this afternoon, so it also doesn't count what's fallen in the last 6.5 hours. But in total, if you put everything together, since at least 1 o'clock this afternoon till whatever it ends, most of the rainfall amounts are on the order of an inch to 2 inches. The northern fringe of this is only going to be on the order of a half an inch when you go just north of New York City. Again, that's because that mainly the areas from northern New Jersey north and east completely miss out on the first shot of rain, or the bulk of the first shot of rain. I think actually Saturday for a lot of that area is going to just wind up being a cloudy day and not much else happening. And if you're up in northern Connecticut, Massachusetts, central New York, and on up into northeastern New England, you're probably going to have the sun out tomorrow. So it won't be a half bad day in your particular area. Further south, you should get some heavy rains. Of course, that's all being produced by those thunderstorms that are going on now, and you're getting these rains of up to 2 inches plus since 1 o'clock this afternoon across southern Illinois, southern Indiana, and through much of Kentucky and points out to the east. I know, Johnny Quest, you're on, so you've got the canoe and the paddle, and of course all the snow melt that occurred, all that snow from last weekend getting completely washed away by this system. The snows there from Saturday and Sunday, they were thinning out as we moved through the week with the lack of a really cold air mass in the east to hold it in. So you've had melting all week. Now you've got all this rain on top of it. So it's not a surprise that some areas are going to be experiencing flooding. Now, the long-range question, because of course everybody wants a white Christmas even in Florida. And I get that. We still have issues with respect to trying to get the upper atmosphere to kind of has to correct itself with what's going on the Pacific side. So I'm going to bring up our friendly neighborhood 4 indices, and it's if those of you who watched last night might immediately say, boy, that looks a little different than last night. Yeah, it does, because every day as the models change, The snapshots are going to change. The one thing that sort of stands out to me is the fact that the EPO, the East Pacific Oscillation, and that measures pressure changes in a large area in the northern Pacific. And when that area is positive, okay, when the reading is positive, and it's an inverse. So when pressures are low, lower than average in that particular large geographic area, and in this case, it is over much of this large geographic area where you see pressures are low, you've got a very strong positive reading. That cuts cold air off into the east. However, in about 5 days, we see that EPO crashing to neutral right around the 19th, 20th. This is around the dates toward the end of next week where the models are bringing a cold front and a wave on a low that develops with that frontal system and showing some rather impressive rains for later Thursday night and Friday of next week. So this is your EPO crashing. When you see these moves from strong positive to zero, or from zero to strong negative, I mean, that's what it's telling you, is that the pressures, there are big pressure changes underway. So you're going from very low pressure in the Pacific to higher pressures in the Pacific and in the northern Pacific. And this is going to open the spigots of cold air to some degree as we get closer to Christmas and beyond, because you'll see that the index does go negative. So that's telling us that higher pressures are going to be building across the North Pacific, and that opens up cold air. It opens up the spigots of cold air and the flow from northwest Canada to bring that cold air into the United States. Now, depending on where the troughs and ridges set up, to ultimately will decide, how much cold air comes in and who gets it. But that is at least the signal that you're going to get some cold air coming in. The PNA, the Pacific North America Index, remains strongly positive right through next week. So when this crash of the EPO happens, the Pacific North America Index, which is trough in the east, ridge in the west, that index measures pressure changes over two separate geographic areas, strongly positive through all of next week. So you're going to have this ridge in the west and combined with a deepening trough in the east. So there's a signal there. You got the strong PNA with that crashing EPO. The NAO on today's run is really not doing much of anything. It's kind of weakly positive through all of next week. It's probably, I think it's the reason why you're getting this little bleed down of cold air with the weak North Atlantic oscillation, pressure changes in the North Atlantic, and also is the reason why we haven't seen a monumental huge warm up here in the east. This is really the first day this week where temperatures actually broke above 50, so we're above average today. That we haven't had many above average days in the last several weeks. Then the NAO gets a little more positive as we move toward the end of the month, and all that is telling us is that if it's less negative or a little more positive, that there's not a whole lot of blocking in the atmosphere. So weather systems are going to be kind of free to move along from west to east at a regular clip. I've always said that for me, it's the negative EPO that I think is the most important of all of the three indices, and then the PNA follows, and that the NAO is probably the one that is the most looked at and the one that is probably vastly overstated. I'd much rather would have, if we got to have a positive NAO, that's fine. If the EPO is negative, if you're a snow lover, you're better off that way. You take your chances. Okay, I guess that's the best way to put it. So let's go to that upper air as we go into next week. And first thing, we'll watch what happens in the Pacific. All that blue, that's all low pressure that's out in the Pacific. That's where you measure the EPO, the East Pacific Oscillation. Now, as we go through next week, you'll notice that the area of lower than normal pressures or lower than normal heights decreases. Okay, with the low that gets concentrated in the Gulf of Alaska, you start to get pressure rises along the west coast, and going up into Western Canada. And suddenly, you've got a flow established from northwest Canada into the plains and into the western lakes. You also have a trough that's setting up in the middle of the country here, okay? So that's why this weather system for later next week, if it's real, is going to be mostly a rain event for the coast. And you can see that the trough actually strengthens considerably as it heads into the northeast. So it's got a pretty wet system here going forward. And then that lifts out, followed by another trough going into Sunday. And you still have yet another short wave that tries to swing through around Christmas Day. Doesn't look all that strong. But you do have a flow from Canada now. So I'll bring the paint box back up. And hang on. So here we are. This is the upper pattern now for forecast for Christmas Day. So by then, here's your Canadian connection. So you have a jet that's up here. So that's bringing down some cold air. It's not an especially cold flow. It's not accompanied by a deep vortex over Hudson's Bay, for example, or over Labrador, but it's enough. You are getting a cold flow. You also have a bit of a southern jet here with another trough that's coming in to the west. You got a cutoff low in the Gulf of Alaska, a ridge, a cutoff low in the Aleutians, a ridge in the Gulf of Alaska, and that is helping your East Pacific oscillation here. Okay, so again, to have that be slightly negative, which is what the indices see. You also have a bit of a ridge that's building up in the Atlantic from the Azores to Greenland. That kind of traps this vortex here for a bit, and that would likely sustain the cold from Christmas and beyond, assuming this is day 10 now on the long range. So we're assuming that this is going to be correct. I'm sure there are going to be changes. Now, when we look at the literal run of the model, again, this is today's late afternoon snapshot. I said yesterday that it's about, you do have a lot of energy running around. There's a lot of short waves that are running around. So the problem is that each run is going to key on a different short wave, and as a result, you're going to wind up seeing models doing different things. For example, I'm going to go back one run. Okay, I'm going to go back to the late morning run of the GFS, the one that starts at 10:30 Eastern time. And now I've got it on the screen for you guys to see. And this was Christmas Day, but I'm going to go back a little bit. Here's your system for Thursday into Friday. You can see it's got it brings a system from the Great Lakes and then a low that kind of runs up from the Gulf with some heavy rains. You wind up with a deep low in southern Vermont, New Hampshire. Probably be big snows for parts of upstate New York and parts of New England. That low got very deep on that particular run. Cold air behind it. But then there's a diver that comes down for Sunday. Okay, and that moves the low. That diver looks like it goes by just to the north of New York City, and then you've got another weak system that comes through around Christmas Day. This is because on that particular model run, it timed everything out differently. Each system impacts the one ahead of it and the one behind it, so you're going to see the models change to some degree. I'm going to go back even further. Let's go back to the mid-run from last night where everything was timed differently. So here's your system for late in the week, a non-event. Okay, why? Because it had this fast-moving shortwave in the northern stream, and it never really brought out the southern energy that you see producing precip in the western Gulf of Mexico, which just kind of left it there. All right, the new runs have not done that. Now you have another system for Sunday. This old run suggested that system would get left behind in the Gulf and then attempt to come up sometime on the 23rd. And then you've got this other system that brings some snow and rain with a low off the Delaware coast for the 26th. and then it really intensified it when it was east of the New Jersey coast. This is the parallel GFS, by the way. The regular GFS had a completely different idea of what's going on. So, again, every run is going to be different. So now we're looking at all the model runs from late this afternoon, kind of keying now on the idea that you are going to be able to bring some energy out of the southern stream, and you wind up, the European is very similar to this, by the way. You've got a low there that pops up near St. Louis with a secondary low that is along the Florida, in southeastern Virginia. There's not a whole lot of cold air except on the northwestern edge of this where you see some snow. And you've got a wrapped up low that winds up going up toward Lake Erie now and heads up into southeastern Canada. Cold air comes in behind it. Weak diver for Christmas Day that just all the snow winds up getting left back west of the mountains. Then you got another system that comes along, a cold front with cold air behind it and a wave that goes off the southeast coast. And then yet another one that follows and moves like right along. Very fast flow. Cold air that's spreading out from Canada during that last week of December. How far south does that cold air get? We don't know. But again, it's about the timing of the different short waves. Each model run is doing it differently. I'll just go back to what I said yesterday, that at this stage, we're 11 days out. I think there's still room for short waves to get timed out a little differently, and that the door for the possibility for a white Christmas for parts of the Northeast and the northern mid-Atlantic states, I think remains open. It's going to be a matter of seeing how the models handle all this energy that's running around in the north. I mean, if you look at these shortwave troughs, I mean, here's the first one for this weekend. Then you go into next week, and here's the one for late in the week, which makes this massive cutoff low now in southern Indiana. And you start to get that cold connection after that one goes by. And then you get another short wave that is evident there in the upper air, kind of gets lost a bit as it moves out off the coast on Christmas Day. Ridge pops up briefly. You got the model trying to trough it out in the west. I don't know if that's correct. I don't think it is. The parallel, what did that do? That kind of troughed it out in the center. The European on day 10. Okay, here's the European on day 10. Let me widen it out. I know I'm throwing a lot at you here, but look, you got all these different models doing different things. We can go on. We could go forever doing this. We can pull out every model that goes out into the long range. You're going to get a different solution from every single one of them once you get past days 5 and 6. Okay, that's just the way it works. So that's why I'm saying the flavor is you've got all this energy running around. We still don't know how all these puzzle pieces are going to ultimately line up. So I'm going to just continue to keep a very open mind on the longer term pattern as we head toward the end of the month, and we head toward Christmas, and then eventually toward New Year's. Look, it's a matter of time for you snow lovers out there. It's just a matter of time, considering what you've seen during the last 30 days. You've been living in a bonus dreamland for the most part. I'm thinking that there are a lot of areas in the South that may have already seen their biggest snowstorm of the whole winter season. If they wind up getting another one between now and March, just for the snow lovers who live in those areas, I guess you could consider yourselves lucky, because I mean you can go years without seeing a storm of magnitude, and if you wind up seeing a second one, whoa, that's really that really would be highly unusual. All right, John Trabacchino, you might get a little snow out of this for Sunday into Sunday night, so you might want to pay close attention. New York Jets fan, the blizzard of 2010 was a day off of being a perfect situation. I will tell you this, if you look at some of the big storms going back, there are a lot of them that the long range picked out in one form or another, but there are also a lot of them that didn't really show up until you got into inside the 7-day period, and in some cases not even till inside the 5-day period. you kind of had the puzzle pieces there, but the models didn't really come together with it until you got closer to the short range. So that's another reason why you can't look at that long range and regard it as biblical. Jess Harden, you're looking for snow in Alabama. You're not going to get it until we get that East Pacific oscillation to go strongly negative. Okay, you got to get that to happen. You do have that active southern jet because that's being induced by that El Nino and the weak El Nino, which is a positive. Now you just got to get the colder air to come in. Anthony Orr is on board. You know, my resident statistician, who I just adore because he comes up with such great stuff. Scotty, I know you've been coming up with great stuff too, Scott Briller. Not to take anything away from you, but Anthony is Anthony. And, you know, he's pointing to the SOI. Now, you see, this is why I also don't get in to the long range and haven't really gotten my head around it, because there are all these indices that you look at, and they all have these values attached to them, and it's too much for me. So I don't even remember what the SOI stands for, to tell you the truth. So it's at 2169, and it's not good for winter fans. I think that SOI index has got to be a low number, and that is more favorable for winter weather fans. But I will tell you this: I can think back to the winter of 2015 and 16 when I kept being told that this technical long range indicator was not in a good spot, was in the wrong spot, and this other one was in the wrong spot. You can't have big storms when you have these indices reading these numbers, and in reality we wound up having a couple of them. So look, it happens. Hey, Johnny Quest, thank you so much, hitting super chat tonight. That's a cigar for me on the drive home. I really appreciate it. Thank you. And you didn't have to do that. Thank you very much. Let's see, Linda Hernandez, welcome aboard. Under a flood watch, expecting 2+ inches of rain tomorrow on top of the snow melt. That snow melt, I'm thinking that you're in interior Virginia, North Carolina. That snow melt alone is worth 2 inches of liquid on top of whatever 2 inches of rain falling. So you're effectively getting 4 inches of impact in terms of rain. And that's a big reason why you've got that the flood watch that's up for much of Virginia and for North Carolina. And with those rains continuing into Saturday, that is definitely not good. I know for you, John Trabacchino, 15-16 was not a good winter, but there was this sort of narrow area in that one big storm that in mid-January that produced record snowfalls and record 24-hour snowfalls. And in fact, for New York City, Long Island, northern New Jersey, southernmost New England, as I think I might include southern New England, during February and early March, we had a couple of coastal lows that impacted just the coastal areas. Okay, so I know everybody around, it was the one storm that winter and that's it. And for interior New England and northern New England and upstate New York, that was not a good winter at all. Anthony Orr points out that a negative SOI is what you would wanted to see for winter fans. However, no one indicator is the only one thing to look at. That's correct. I absolutely agree. Totally. You can't look at one indicator and say that is the magic bullet. It just doesn't work that way. This is why I get kind of upset with the NAO obsessed, because they keep going back to the NAO and there's no negative NAO. Well, look what just happened. We had a NAO that was it wasn't even strongly negative. It was weakly negative, but it was negative enough that you wound up with the storm not getting much further north than southernmost Delaware. So it actually can work against you if you've got too much NAO and not enough of everything else. That you could wind up getting a storm passing to your south, like the one last week, or you could wind up getting something suppressed way to the south and staying weak. That's why you have to be really careful when you look at these things and say that, I have X, therefore Y must happen. It just doesn't play that way. Mariko Brown, will Atlanta get snow soon? Not in this. Not in this pattern. Not yet. We got to get that again. We got to change the Pacific. The North Pacific pattern has got to. The North Pacific pattern has got to change. It's going to change, but it's got to change from what it is now. So you're going to have to wait. Once that changes, if it can get negative enough, that's when you could see, cold air getting pushed far enough south into the southeast, like we had earlier in the month, for example. It wasn't enough for you to get snow from the system that just happened, but perhaps maybe on the next one. Charlie Baker, you're absolutely right. 18 is going down. At least certainly the second half of this year has been incredibly wet, and we've been talking about the fact that places like Wilmington, North Carolina, and I'm sure a host of others in North Carolina are going to have over 100 inches of rain for the year and have all-time yearly records going by the board. Would I be shocked, asks Scott Briller, if Central Park 6.4 storm in November would be the biggest? Oh, the 6.4 inches of snow? No, I wouldn't be. It's not the first time that we would have had the biggest snowfall occur outside the winter season, technically outside the winter season, and it wouldn't be the last. So I don't think the probability of that happening is very high. If we were in February already, if this were February 15th, I might give you a slightly different answer because of the standpoint that you're running out of time. But at this stage of the game, I think the probability, because you've got time in your favor here, the probability of it being the highest snowfall in the winter at this stage of the game, is pretty low. All right. Now you see here, John, don't make conclusions yet. The fall winter of 8-19 will be the winter of edges. But don't, what we've had now is early and a bonus. Most years you don't have what we've had in the last 30 days. Anthony, by the way, Anthony, I would just be kind of curious. What was the SOI going back a month ago? I don't know if you have that data handy. I'd be just kind of curious as to where that was from mid-November into last weekend. Okay, was it negative? Was it positive? Was it not as positive as it is now? I'm just kind of curious from the part of the discussion that what we were talking about with not being no one indicator, as you correctly pointed out. No one indicator is the magic bullet. Greenfire 919, yep, you're absolutely right on that. Very active pattern, which is going to stay active. I thought I saw Okie AG on here. Where is he? There he is. I'm guessing it's not a good time to discuss the 60 and sprinkles you had. Yeah, I did see. I saw there was a fair amount of rain for the eastern part of your state for a little while on the radar over the last day or so. But yeah, you've got the 60-degree readings there in Oklahoma. That positive EPO is hurting you too, from the standpoint of cold air. It shows you how important that EPO really is in the equation. So if all those magic bullets, quote unquote, that's the one that you want in your favor. Then you can work on the others and fix those up as you go along, and then you watch the pattern evolve. All right, folks. I think that we'll call that a wrap for tonight. We're 54 minutes into this fabulous live stream, so thanks very much for being here. Let me at least give you a little bit of an idea of what I'm going to be doing this weekend, schedule-wise. I'm going to, I'm going to live stream at some point tomorrow. I'm not 100% sure when. Johnny Quest, Joe and Joe show tonight at 9:20 on Facebook. Okay, so we'll be on. Joe Rayo will be, and I will be on my Facebook page, meteorologist Joe Chaffee. So I will try to live stream on tomorrow at some point. I might not do it at the usual time. I'm going to see how my schedule. Dio Nankumar, thank you so much. The Android app, I made it so that it just makes it easy to get my the stuff that I write for my website, plus other things. And you're going to be getting an update soon. Keep your fingers crossed that Google doesn't give us a hard time. But you're going to be getting an update soon, and there's going to be a whole bunch of new stuff on there that I think you're going to like. So just be patient. Hopefully in the next couple of weeks. And you iPhone users, just be patient too. That's, dealing with Apple and Google is really like dealing with the government. Okay, it really is. They are so they are so enormous in their influence that it's like you're dealing with the federal government. You fill out a form and you have to just sit there and wait until they feel like until they get around to it. It's very, very frustrating. Technology in many ways has made things very, very easy and very, very fast. But when in the process of putting it together, it's like building a house, okay, and getting permits. It takes forever. All right, so just be patient with me. I appreciate your patience. John Trabacchino, thank you for the kind words on the app and my Patreon platform. And let me just say really quick, again, for those of you who are interested, my weather platform on Patreon, we do a lot of stuff, weather stuff there. You can message me anytime. Live streams just for Patreon members. We usually do those in the morning, and then we do this live YouTube stream at night for everybody. But you get the private one in the morning, and you get all sorts of other posts and weather information that's going on, especially during storms. So that's a subscription platform. It is just $2 a month. So I appreciate those of you who have joined, and thank you, and those of you who might consider it. Thank you very much. And one last thing, just to mention that we are a participant in the Amazon Services LLC program, which is an affiliate advertising program designed to provide links to Amazon and its sites. If you go and shop on Amazon for your Christmas stuff or any other stuff, and you do it through my link, which is on the descriptor to this live stream and the descriptor to this video, you get your stuff. Amazon throws me back a little bit of coin. In other words, they put some cigars in my Christmas stocking out of their pocket, and it's a great way to support my channel in a very easy way, and you don't have to do anything but do the shopping that you would normally do anyhow. So I put the link up there on the live stream. Thank you very much for being here tonight, everybody. It's been a great week. Always enjoy my time with you on the live streams, and we will see you tomorrow. Sunday, we'll probably do it after all the football games are done. The Giants play at 1, which I guess if the Jets, I don't know what time if the Jets play on Sunday. I'm guessing they play at 4, unless they got the night game. I'm not even sure what the schedule is. I'm a Giant fan, so I just kind of pay attention to them. And thank you again, by the way, New York Jets fan weather for hitting Super Chat, and Johnny Quest for hitting Super Chat. Thank you very, very much. I appreciate it. We'll see you guys tomorrow.